Hi, and welcome back to the Happiness Safari podcast. My name is Nadine, and I'm here to guide people to connect to who they really are through yoga and coaching so that they don't feel lost and lonely anymore, but are empowered to live the life of their dreams. The Happiness Safari podcast is here to inspire you through stories from incredible people around the world. On today's episode, I talk to Brittany. We speak about how her panic attacks led her on a journey of self-discovery while traveling the world for over 8 years. During that time, she became a yoga teacher and also a Wim Hof instructor. Now Brittany lives full-time in her self-converted van with her puppy Polly, which you will see or hear during the interview, and travels around the US hosting Wim Hof workshops and spending as much time barefoot and communing with nature. Additionally, she works for Microdosing Institute, a Dutch microdosing education and research platform. With over a decade of experience in the health and wellness space, Brittany has held space for positive transformation for hundreds of humans in various settings. As a trauma-informed coach, her priority is holding a safe, compassionate space infused with playfulness where her students can safely explore the magic within their inner landscapes. And I experienced that live in Portugal in 2020 when I met Brittany first for a breathwork session by the beach, followed by an ocean dip, and that was in November. And then we did an ice bath together in my apartment with a couple of people. So I did my first ice bath with her, and it was really an amazing experience. And the way she led the whole thing, the breathwork and preparation before, and also warming us up after, as well as guiding us through the time being in the ice cold water. It was super, super amazing. That's why I wanted to have her on the podcast. So we also talk about the benefits of the Wim Hof method, cold exposure and breathwork, and also why your diet and lifestyle are not the only things affecting your health. From today's episode, you will learn how to break out of your routine, how to build a tolerance to stress, why you should try an ice bath, why breathwork is good for your mental state, how an ice bath can connect you to yourself, why a lifestyle should be in line with your core values, what microdosing is, and how microdosing can help you with your general well-being. I really hope you will enjoy the episode and take a lot of insights for yourself. Hi, Brittany. I'm so happy that you made it and you found the time and also good space with your van, good internet connection to talk to me today. And very happy to have you on the podcast. And we had a little chat before, but maybe tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do and who you are.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, first of all, for the space and having me on the podcast today. I wear several hats. I do quite a few different things and have quite a few interests that sometimes on surface seem really disconnected, but actually feel, for me, a very holistic way to approach life. So I've been a yoga teacher. And I have to apologize. I do live in my van full time. It's a super tiny space, and my dog lives with me, and every now and then she likes to make appearances. So if you hear some ruckus in the background, that's Polly. But I've been in the movement space for well over a decade. I started in that space as a personal trainer. I eventually added yoga to my toolkit. And from there, I really started digging into breathwork and meditation, which is mostly what I tend to focus on more now. I am a certified Wim Hof method instructor. So along with breathwork, I'm also a huge fan of cold exposure, which I know you have experienced and explored with me before. But then I also work for a Dutch company called the Microdosing Institute. So I also educate and teach on the topic of microdosing psychedelics, specifically in the realm for mental health and well-being. So between cold exposure, breathwork, yoga, movement, microdosing, it seems, again, like it can be really disconnected, but I think all of these practices are really wonderfully connected and together, really, really, really supportive for most humans.
Yeah, I do think so too. And I mean, I'm doing, several things as well. And I'm also into, I guess, trying several things. And actually, yeah, as you said, I tried actually the Wim Hof breath, I think the first time with you, and then also the cold exposure. So when we met in Portugal in 2020 in Lagos. And yeah, so that's maybe the two things I would like to talk about a little bit more, because I think I had yoga teachers and people talking about meditation on the podcast before, but you're the first official Wim Hof instructor, and also the first person who works for Microdosing Institute, and both topics are super, super interesting. So maybe if we start with the Wim Hof first, yeah, if you just want to I guess maybe tell everybody who doesn't really know so much about him, like just a brief introduction, what it is and what it does, maybe why you should do it or try it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Wim Hof method, it was created by someone named Wim Hof. He is a Dutchman. He's also frequently known or called the Iceman. But Wim has superhuman strengths. At least on paper, that's what it looks like. It looks like he is superhuman. And what I mean by this, he has a ton of world records. He's done a lot of really crazy things like climbing Mount Everest without oxygen in his shorts, running marathons in the desert without water. He's just really able to handle extremes very, very well. And Wim's theory is that it's not just him that can do these things. These types of feats are possible for anyone. And there's three different, actually, one of them tends to not get spoken about enough, but there's three different tools that he says, if and when practiced by most people, can really help create resilient, happy, healthy human beings. And those things are breath work, cold exposure, and mindset. So the three practices together, they're very, very complementary, very circular with each other. And each practice has its own well-documented and becoming better documented and backed up by science benefits. So I guess maybe I'll jump into each of those quickly. But the breath work, there's many, many, many different ways to do breath work. For those who aren't familiar with what that term means, it's any intentional manipulation of your breath. So if I ask you to hold your breath right now, or if I ask you to extend your exhalation, you would be doing breath work, a very simple form or kind of breath work. The technique used for the Wim Hof method, it involves a series of really quick, almost controlled hyperventilation. And then that's followed by a breath hold. And you repeat this for several rounds. And what's really cool about this, it really changes very quickly the physiology of your body. So you get some hormonal impacts. It impacts your body's circulatory system. It increases the amount of red blood cells that you have. And all of those things collide together to help improve your immune function. A lot of people, and this one is less backed up by science, but a lot of people say that practicing the breathwork technique has significantly impacted their mental state positively. So a lot of people have used it to, manage symptoms from depression and anxiety. And then, the immune system boost as well is a really, really, really wonderful element of that technique. So that's the breath work. And then cold exposure, which is the other side, similarly, basically it involves dunking yourself in ice cold temperatures, ice cold water. You don't necessarily have to have ice to get the benefits. It just needs to be cold enough for you to be uncomfortable. That's sort of the measuring stick for how cold is cold enough. It's a question we get quite often.
Exactly. But I was thinking for some people, cold could be, I don't know, maybe 15 degrees could be cold enough to be uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't remember if you did an ocean dip with us, but when I was in Portugal, we went to breath work on the beach. And we would follow that up with a dip in the ocean. The ocean at that point was around 15, 16 degrees Celsius. And for some people, especially people who are well practiced with cold exposure, that actually feels quite warm and cozy.
Yeah.
For people who aren't used to cold exposure, haven't practiced it a lot, that can actually feel very, very, very frigid and cold. And really the measuring stick for how do you practice cold exposure is it uncomfortable for you? And then you slowly, just like working out, you slowly start to build up tolerance and you slowly start to get used to it. And then you can stay in the cold for longer and you can go into colder temperatures. But I think the important thing, why would someone want to do that? Because it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Which I know you know very well because you would do the ocean dips with me, but also you did do an ice bath with me. And there's a couple of things. That discomfort is actually really key to the cold exposure, because if you can learn how to control your response to that discomfort in a fairly safe situation, as long as you follow a few basic rules, cold exposure is very safe. If you can learn to control that stress response when you're really uncomfortable, that explodes into every other arena of your life where stress might happen, which, as we all know, being human, there are a lot of instances where we're just handed really stressful situations without our choosing, and then we have to deal with that. And learning how to do that in the cold really does cross over into every element of your life where you might experience stress. So that's one huge benefit. But a couple other benefits as well. Again, physiologically, you get some hormone boosts. I won't go into specific details about this, but you get some hormone boosts, including dopamine, that, again, a lot of people have said that cold exposure over time, when practiced regularly, helps them manage mental health like depression and anxiety. You do also get an immune boost. It's also like a workout for your circulatory system, which is really wonderful. And the more your circulatory system functions optimally, the more your entire body gets nutrient delivery. That's one of the big elements of our cardiovascular system, is delivering nutrients to your muscles and tissues.
Yeah.
So the more optimized that process is, the healthier all of the tissues in your body become, and the healthier you feel over time. And the healthier you feel generally, the happier you're able to walk through life. So I know I just threw like a ton of words at you.
It's okay.
But yeah, so that's the cold exposure and breath work.
Yeah, but I will put the links in the show notes for people to find also Wim Hof and, like the benefits, and maybe you can help me out or find some good links if people want to get into it. But I also I get into like longevity. I don't know if you know David Sinclair.
Familiar-ish.
Yeah, okay, like following him, and he is a leading scientist on the field of longevity, and he's basically saying also that we have to expose ourselves to, let's say, stressful situations for the body. Anything like that is good. So he's actually also speaking about cold exposure and also about the heat. And that's my field because I'm a hot yoga teacher. So that's what I'm telling people also. If they're in the hot room, they feel uncomfortable, but it makes them stronger, because if they can stay 90 minutes in the heat, then, they can also achieve other things in life. So that's the same thing you were saying. And then he also says, for example, fasting, we should fast more, because we are so used to, eat like 3 to 5 times a day, but then our digestive system is constantly working. But if we're actually giving our body a break, the cells can renew. And because in the past, when we were hunting, we were eating maybe something, once a day, and then, or once every 3 days, and then we didn't have any access to food. So we just had time to, regenerate the body. And I think that's the same with the cells and the cold exposure. So he's also recommending to go running in a t-shirt, and maybe sometimes just freeze a little or be a little bit cold, because we are actually so comfortable all the time. Like, you know, we have heaters and heated homes and everything, like nice clothes, and we are always comfortable. We always have access to food, but that actually doesn't make us stronger. It makes us weaker as a, you know, as a human. And so I guess the cold exposure probably also is good for that, to make you stronger, and you say then healthier, but also live longer, because your vitals, your heart functions better, and so on. Would that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think there's a really good point here, and that's we'll just quickly say hi to
Yes, she is.
And the point that you made, like, you know, stress, your body doesn't necessarily say, oh, I'm in cold stress, or I'm in hot stress, or I'm in emotional stress, or I'm in a situation that is causing me mental stress. Stress is stress is stress is stress is stress. You know, the body doesn't necessarily segment between different types of stress. So again, if you can intentionally put yourself in safe arenas of stress, whether that's fasting, heat exposure, like in hot yoga, cold exposure, you know, it all crosses over to everything. And even, you know, it was really interesting. One thing I didn't anticipate from my cold practice when I first started it is that I actually was able to tolerate significant heat way better. I remember the first time I went back to the sauna after having a regular cold exposure practice, I literally was able to handle the hottest sauna rooms for the longest period of time, whereas before that was not the case. So it's really interesting at, you know, the crossover that it has. It's not that you're just building tolerance to the heat like you would in Bikram, or that you're just building tolerance to the cold. You're building tolerance to stress. Your body doesn't differentiate between what's causing the stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super cool. But so what would you recommend people to try? Because I guess the breath work, you can maybe also find, I mean, YouTube videos, and you can obviously find somebody like you or you to work with you. But if somebody would want to try the cold exposure, I guess you wouldn't recommend to straight go to an ice bath by yourself without the breathing because we did some like preparation before, and also, you know, some exercise after. So I think, but would you then recommend people to start with cold showers, or?
Yeah, so there's a couple of resources. So there is an app that Wim Hof has, and that's a great and excellent place to start checking out. It helps guide you through the breath work, but it does also give you tips for building up your exposure to the colds. But even without the app, generally, my starting tip for people is start with cold showers. They're generally the most accessible for people. Not everyone has a way to get a lot of ice in a tub, or even a lot of ice cold water in a tub. But cold showers can still give you similar effects. So at the end of your hot shower, just turn the cold shower down enough. Again, it just has to be enough to make you comfortable, to make you gasp a little bit. And over time, you can slowly increase the amount of time that you're staying in that cold shower. So initially, when you turn it down, you may only stay under the cold shower for 5 seconds, enough to get that like, oh, whoa, that was cold. And then the more you get used to that, you can slowly extend the amount of time you're in the cold shower. And eventually people build up to a point to where they don't even need the hot shower to pop into a cold shower for a few minutes. So that's the easiest. But a couple other things I just want to caution people. It is really important to build up your tolerance to the cold. So similarly, if you've never worked out in your life and you go to a CrossFit class, your body will be wrecked for weeks. If you go to, you know, an advanced, let's say not a beginner's, like an advanced level, you're just jumping right in with everyone that's been going to the gym for ages.
Yeah.
your nervous system and cardiovascular system get a workout during cold exposure. I call it a workout for both of those systems. It's not uncommon for people when they first start practicing or the very first ice bath that they do, literally I'll hear like, I slept like a rock last night after that ice bath. And it's because it is a workout for your nervous system and cardiovascular system. So building up over time is really important so that you're not wrecking yourself. And then also one other resource I'll throw out as well is just finding someone who has studied cold exposure in great detail. Of course, any Wim Hof instructor has done so, but there are definitely other people that have a lot of experience with cold training as well. And attending a workshop in your area, if it's possible. It's always a great way to, get your feet wet for your whole body.
Yeah, very good. And now I actually have to go into quickly maybe your personal story. I mean, how did you actually get into all of these things? Because I call it on the podcast probably the journey to happiness, because not everybody starts yoga and meditation and cold exposure or is looking for these things or breath work. So what happened, or where was a point in your life where you maybe changed or where you started to seek these things?
Yeah, so my story starts a little over 10 years ago. I was living in Chicago. I had a very urban lifestyle. I owned a gym. My life was very go, go, go. I went out to dinners with friends all the time. My goal was always like, how can I make the gym better? Growing myself into work. And along with some personal struggles, I started having panic attacks. And for those who have never experienced a panic attack, one of the key experiences of a panic attack is that it feels like you can't breathe. It literally takes your breath away. And your breath is, it's your life source. You can last several weeks without food. You can last a few days without water. Most people can last, a minute or two without breath.
Yeah.
And so when it feels like you can't breathe, it also feels like you're dying. So panic attacks can be very, very, very intense. And, at the time I thought my wellness routine was perfect. I owned a gym. I ate really well. I worked out regularly. All of these, cornerstone wellness things I did pretty well, but I was having panic attacks. And this went on for months. I had no clue what was causing them. And then I went to a fitness conference with a mentor of mine. His name is Dr. Perry Nicholson, and he owns a company called Stop Chasing Pain. And he was talking about movements, but he made a comment, and that comment was, if you can't breathe in that position, you don't belong in that position. So people have probably experienced this in yoga sometimes where the teacher asks you to get in this weird pose and then they say breathe and you're like, but I can't breathe. Well, it probably means that you have not built up to earning that position yet. And maybe we need to find an alternative position for you.
Yeah.
So he meant it in the sense of movement, but it really triggered for me. I was like, I can't breathe. Literally. Panic attacks are taking my breath away. Maybe that's a sign that something in my environment is not right for me. Maybe I'm not supposed to be here. So I made a huge, huge, huge change. I sold everything I owned. I whittled all of my belongings down to a backpack. And I decided to take some time off. And that time off ended up turning into 2 years backpacking around the world. And during that time, that's when I went to yoga. I got my yoga teacher training. I started exploring breath work more. And I really, really, really got fascinated with breath work because I wanted to understand more why my breath was being taken away from me. And I don't like that feeling. I don't think anyone who's experienced it likes that feeling. So that really was the journey of me starting to build a relationship with my breath. along the way, I moved to the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, that is where Wim Hof is from. He's Dutch. It is very challenging to not hear his name all of the time in the Netherlands. Dutch people are very proud of Wim. He's a very well-known figure there. And the first gym that I worked at there, there was a Wim Hof instructor who had trained very closely with Wim, who invited me to do an ice bath. So that was the start of my cold exposure training. My first ice bath was terribly uncomfortable. I wasn't sure I'd ever do it again. But slowly I kept showing up for it again and again. And then I actually started to really enjoy it. And for me, you know, there's so many benefits to an ice bath, but for me, the biggest benefit was really just a really deep connection with myself. Every time I get into the ice, it's like the world quiets. I'm very connected to myself. It's a very spiritual experience. And then that led me to wanting to actually study with Wim himself so that I could, you know, offer this method to others. So that's sort of a little bit of a long story, but from panic attack to Wim Hof facilitator. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing the story. I mean, definitely very inspiring. And I mean, but when you had these panic attacks, I mean, you had really no clue where they were coming from.
I mean, initially, no, not at all. Like initially, you know, before I started having them, I really was convinced that I had the best lifestyle in the world. I mean, Chicago is a great city. I loved the city, urban lifestyle. For the most part, I did eat really well and I was working out. And so, you know, especially that early on in my career, I really didn't understand how much more affects your health and your well-being beyond sort of these surface level things that we're constantly taught are the most important things.
Yeah.
But my lifestyle was not in alignment with my core values. I didn't know what my core values were then either. So that was part of the struggle. You know, in your early 20s, there is a lot of exploration and moving through the world and trial and error that comes into play in terms of figuring out who you are. So yeah, I didn't really at that point know what was most important to me. And because I also didn't know what was most important to me, it wasn't obvious that I was living a lifestyle that wasn't aligned with those things. So yeah, it's definitely been a long journey of figuring that out. And, you know, now I can look back and I very clearly understand what was causing the panic attacks.
Yeah.
But in the thick of it, no.
No, interesting. And you didn't try to, I mean, actually ask people or get help or try to.
So I was in therapy for sure. Okay. But, you know, I mean, living in the US, you know, therapy was just you go and you talk to someone and there was no external support from there. You know, there was no, it literally was just like, congratulations, you have panic attacks. Let's talk about it. But there was no support outside of lifestyle change. There was no support in terms of figuring out what my triggers were. It literally was very, you know, clinical and, you know, talk to someone, figure out what the diagnosis was, and then continue talk therapy and hope it helps. And that's not to say that talk therapy isn't really valuable, because it is, but I needed a lot more beyond talk therapy. I needed lifestyle change. And that was never part of the conversation at least with the therapist that I was with at the time.
But that was very brave, I guess. I mean, what did your friends or family say when you said, I sell everything and I leave?
I mean, most people, I think, were not too shocked. However, I definitely got a lot of like, you know, you have everything here. Like, why would you give this up? You know, I had a condo. I had a successful business. I was doing really well for myself. Like, why would you give that up? So there was definitely a lot of that. I think there was a lot of, people thinking that I would just go on vacation for a few months and come back. I ended up staying out of the US for almost 8 years.
Wow.
And only coming back very recently due to logistics with the pandemic. But yeah, I think a lot of my close friends have always been really supportive, but I also think they don't necessarily understand fully my lifestyle choices.
Still not, you think?
No, definitely not. I mean, a lot of people are very much, especially in the US, very routine based, and they have done what you're supposed to do. They got married, they have kids, they have the big house, they work for promotions, they have a standard 9 to 5 job, which is really like a 7 to 7 p.m. job for people in the US, and they're stuck in routine. And that routine, especially when it's routine that I think most people don't consciously really fully choose. I think it's what is the path of least resistance, because it's what's expected of so many people, and our culture is set up to make that route easier than others. You're clouded. Your vision is clouded by the other possibilities that are open to you. So many of my friends frequently tell me, I wish I could do what you do. And most all of them have the funds, the means, the possibility to do so. Just not the ability to think outside of the construct that's been provided.
Yeah. Wow. But I agree. It's probably, I mean, not just in the US, I mean, at least in Germany, I do think in Europe, it's actually pretty similar. I do think actually most of the places in the world are like that. Like, it is kind of expected. And I think, some countries even more pressure. I think even, I mean, in India, even they are, telling you have to be a doctor or a lawyer, and you have to get married before you move out. And then you have to, and, like, especially I think even poorer countries, they want better for their children. So they even trying to force you more into that lifestyle. So, I think giving up everything, which, maybe for some people is everything they ever wanted to achieve, is a big thing. And that's why they don't really understand.
Yeah.
But
and that's not to say either, any lifestyle is wrong. And there's definitely, a large percentage of people where that lifestyle is the best lifestyle for them, and it is aligned with their values. But I think there's also a lot of people that could be living different lifestyles that make them much happier if there weren't such deeply ingrained social constructs around what success and what success looks like.
Yeah, true. Because I mean, the definition of happiness for some people is success, but it's, I mean, if your goal is to be successful, but then you're not happy, then what's the point, right? So what would you recommend people, I mean, if they would want to, if they're curious to take the step and leave or travel or explore something new or start something new?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step to anything and any change is really truly understanding your why, the intention behind anything. And that can take some deep inner work. It can take being open to looking at maybe uglier things or darker sides of things that, we very easily can put blinders up to. But really, really, really doing some deep internal work to understand your why and what makes you tick. And, the last several years, I've done quite a lot of work to really identify what my core values are. And those core values, they're things that I hold so high and so strongly. And I know them and I feel them deeply in my soul. And a lot of my choices now are guided by understanding that those are the things that make me happier. So every now and then there are choices that I make that are really hard. And I think had I not done this work to really understand my core values, I may have made other decisions simply because they were easier or more well accepted. But when I, again, take that deep internal look, why am I making this decision? And is this decision aligned with the handful of things that I truly, truly, truly know I value more than anything else in the world? And if the answer is yes, then the decision flows a lot more naturally.
Yeah, that
so
makes sense.
understand your work, or understand your why, and just do some work to understand your core values, what really makes you tick and sing, and what makes your heart, thump and bitter better.
Yeah, very good. Okay. And then tell us a little bit more about the microdosing as well, because that's also a super interesting topic if people want to heal, I guess, or maybe what would you use it for? That's the first question.
Yeah. So I think I think the first question is, what is microdosing? Probably. I think there's probably a fair amount of people that either don't know what it is or kind of know what it is.
Yeah.
But microdosing is the semi-regular usage of very small dosage of psychedelic substances with the intention of improving one's quality of life. So that last part, with the intention of improving one's quality of life, it's quite a broad statement. But some of the main reasons that people choose to microdose, or some of the most common benefits that we hear from people from their microdosing practice, it's just increased sense of awareness, greater sense of presence. Oftentimes people do say that it helps them manage their mental health symptoms, especially with depression, sometimes with anxiety, sometimes not with anxiety though. And then there's also a large segment of people using microdosing for pain management, especially in the cluster headache world. A lot of people have found great relief from microdosing. And then there are other people that use it simply because, it makes them feel more creative. It gives them more flow in their day. So the range of why is quite wide, but generally it's to have a better sense of well-being or greater well-being. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Super, super interesting. And then, what would you do, or what is your company doing exactly?
Yeah. So Microdosing Institute, it's a Dutch organization. And it's an education and community forward organization. So basically what that means, we do a lot of work to create and hold space for a global community of microdosers to come together, support each other, talk, share stories. A lot of what we understand about microdosing is anecdotal, which means it's from people's personal stories. There is definitely some research. Most of it is not clinically rigorous yet. There's many reasons for that. Studying psychedelics is a challenge just because most substances are Schedule 1. Things like finding an appropriate placebo is very challenging. So lots of issues that make the clinical research side a challenge, although we are starting to catch up there a little bit. But with that being said, again, most of what we know is from people's personal stories. So we do a lot to create a safe container for our community to be able to share those stories and support each other, to build best practices, to learn harm reduction techniques from each other. And then we sort of take all of that information that our community shares with us, as well as a lot of information that we get from a lot of researchers that we work with. And we sort of put that together to create frameworks, again, further refine best practices, harm reduction, and educate people on those things. So it's this really nice circular process of community involvement, refinement, community involvement, refinement.
I see. And when was the company founded?
The company was founded by our two co-founders, Hein and Jacobine, about 6, almost 7 years ago now.
Okay. And there's that, because microdosing, I feel I came across it only probably 2 years ago or something. Before I never heard anything. Like, is this, I mean, I guess becoming more popular, or when did it actually start, or was it also rediscovered after a while, or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We work with an Indigenous educator. Her name is Social Ashi. And we just did a podcast with her recently. And one of the things that she expresses, and she's a 5th generation medicine woman. Her family for generations have been wisdom keepers around these plant medicines. And one of the things that she says is microdosing's been around for forever. It's just Indigenous people didn't have the term for it, and they didn't have the frameworks that we have for it now. So, Indigenous peoples have used psychoactive substances in many ways, in various quantities, not just the high dose quantities that we are most used to talking about when it comes to psychedelics. There are plenty of examples of Indigenous use of tiny amounts of psychoactive substances as well. But then in the mainstream, it really popped into sort of mainstream Western culture about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer now. There was an article in Rolling Stones magazine about people in the tech space starting to microdose to increase their focus and productivity. And around the same time, Dr. James Fadiman, who is a leading researcher on the topic and one of our advisors, he wrote a book called The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, and it had an entire section on the concept of microdosing. And from there, it's just continued to gain more and more in popularity for several reasons. For a lot of people, it feels far more accessible than a high dose of psychedelics. So that's one reason. And then, the second reason is, there are just a lot of really positive, powerful stories about how people have supported themselves using microdosing. So yeah, that's sort of the long history. It's certainly not a new practice, but a lot of the frameworks, a lot of the terms, those are of course, new and very Western.
Yeah. But that makes sense, right? I mean that, Indigenous people were using that before, and it's the same with like plant medicine, right? And like the healing aspect, and that got lost, the knowledge, I feel, for many, many years. And then we just rediscovered and renamed it, and then, it pops up again. So what would you say? I mean, how would somebody start who would be interested? I guess it depends also what you want to achieve, or like what substance you would try, or is there a beginner one, which is, I guess, the lightest one or something like that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I would recommend is to fully do your research and, research all elements of microdosing before starting a practice. And that includes the legality of substances in your region, which is very widely varied across different regions. One other thing that I will comment about that, oftentimes when people think of microdosing, they think of microdosing psilocybin or magic mushrooms, but there's many other substances available and appropriate for microdosing. Mushrooms are unfortunately not legal in a lot of places. So for some people, just putting in the time and research to understand what is available and legal or unregulated in your area is, one of the first steps. In addition to understanding your why and your intention, and from there, your microdosing practice will be deeply guided by why you're choosing to do it. So, your why will help you determine what substance is best for you. It'll help you determine what dosage is best. It'll help you determine what dosing schedule or how frequently you're going to dose, all of these things. So the first starting point is always, always, always understand your why. And then the second starting point is just to do a ton of research on what is actually accessible for you in your region, given legality and accessibility. And going from there. And we have tons of free information on the Microdosing Institute website. We have a 2.5-hour video course that literally walks you through everything from determining your why and getting crystal clear on that, all the way to, preparation, the process, and integration. So, lots of resources out there for those who are looking to start microdosing practice.
Yeah, very good. I will definitely put that in the show notes for people to find. So interesting, because now you mentioned it twice, basically find your why. So one is personally, and one is also, of course, why would you want to, I mean, not just microdose, but maybe, try anything really to improve your life. So I think that's an interesting one. So maybe I have to ask you, how did you then find your why? I guess there's a long process, but because there's also a book, I don't know if you know that, about from Simon Sinek, about Start With Why.
Yeah. So I think, again, I'm going to go back to a lot of the work I've done on identifying my core values. And most often now, the question that I take on is, does this choice get me closer, or move me in a direction where I'm living in deeper alignment with my core values, or does it take me further away from that?
Yeah.
And that's almost always the question that I'm asking myself before I make most big decisions. And then in terms of, other practices and processes, you can start to get more granular. So if I'm doing a breathwork practice today, I choose to have a breathwork practice in the grand scheme of things, because it's aligned with my core values. But on a daily basis, my why literally may be, I've been really low energy lately, so I'm going to choose a breathwork practice that supports my energy levels. Or I want to explore my inner landscape a bit deeper, so I'm going to choose a breathwork practice that's a bit more esoteric and spiritual today. So on the granular level, my why can be quite basic and it can change all the time. But my bigger why always when making decisions is, do I get closer or further away from these core values that I know make me happiest?
Yeah, very good. Oh God, thank you so much for sharing. So now at the end of the podcast, I always ask the final 3 questions. And one is, what does happiness mean to you?
It's interesting. I stopped chasing happiness a long time ago. And instead, I started reaching for contentment, which is just really the practice of being okay with what is, and being okay with my decisions and my choices, and, not fighting what's coming up, not, taking actions that increase my resistance in everyday life. That in turn has increased my happiness. So for me, I would say contentment is the more important thing to reach for, and contentment in and of itself generally leads to feeling more happier and elated.
Yeah, very good. And well, that leads me to the next question. I can reframe it. So what do you do to be content?
Again, I think it's making choices and decisions that are not against who I am, that are not against my core values. And as long as I'm being very crystal clear about that, my life tends to have far less resistance and contentment. Just honoring who I am on a day-to-day basis, and being okay with that, not trying to fight it.
Very good. And what was the happiest moment in your life?
Oh my gosh, that is such a tough, tough question. I've been really, really, really fortunate in my life to have some really phenomenal and amazing experiences. Although I will say, I think adopting this little baby was probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. So I have many micro moments of happiness with her. And I'd have to say, in general, just my relationship and, having the ability to be Polly's dog mom.
Yeah, I mean, and if people love dogs, and if you don't watch now, or if you watch also, I put your Instagram, Polly's Instagram, also in the show notes, because that made me just so happy just to watch the videos, especially when she was a puppy. I was very happy with you. I was like, oh my God.
Thank you.
Really, really
yeah.
cute.
No, my Instagram is definitely at this point mostly Polly.
Yeah.
Some work stuff, but mostly Polly. I mean, that's what most people are there for. So I try to indulge them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, super cute. Is there any book would you what you would recommend, which, I mean, either usually I ask changed your life, but then I know other things change your life, but maybe, or yeah, maybe even something about Wim Hof or microdosing as well. You can recommend more if you want.
Yeah, I think gosh, there's several books. I'm actually looking at my bookshelf right now. I wouldn't say it changed my life, but it is a book, and it's a little off topic from what we've been talking about, but one that I've really, really, really enjoyed in the last few years. It's called The Nature Fix. It's by Florence Williams, and it's a really wonderful, comprehensive read on all of the science to date that helps us understand how important nature and respecting nature and spending time in nature is for our well-being. So I know we didn't talk a lot about that element today, but eco-centeredness is one of my core values. So living a lifestyle that is very nature forward and respectful of nature is of high importance to me. And that book was a really wonderful read.
Yeah. Wow. What are your other core values? Now you mentioned them so many times. I want to know.
Yeah. So flexibility is one. So I live in my van. I have a job where I'm able to work remotely. Flexibility is a huge, huge, huge element of happiness for me. Eco-centeredness, as I mentioned, living a life that's just very, very, very connected with nature and guided by nature. Playfulness is another core value. And, playfulness, oftentimes people view that as like fun or silly, but really play is just the removal of expectation or the removal of expectation on an outcome. So literally just going into things, and instead of saying, I want this to produce this outcome, I go in and I say, what are the many outcomes that, we can get out of this? And I'm going to be open to all of them. So playfulness is really a wonderful, important part of my life. And then kindness is also a core value, and communication.
Wow. Very good ones. I like them. And it's definitely you. I mean, as far as I know you, but yeah, that makes sense. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and your insights. And again, I'll put everything in the show notes for people to find you and your work and look everything up if they want to go deeper into breathwork or cold exposure or trying microdosing or anything. So is there anything I didn't ask you would like to share with the listeners?
Oh, I don't think so. I'm feeling pretty complete and whole. So thank you for the great questions. And thank you so much for, just offering me space to share some of my, insights from my own journey.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you. Thank you again.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you watched on YouTube, isn't the puppy so cute? But I really hope you took a lot away for yourself and you're curious to try the Wim Hof method or get more into breath work or even try an ice bath, or at least start with some cold showers, see how that affects your life. And also if you feel you want to try microdosing, I think the Microdosing Institute is a great source to learn more. So I put all the links in the show notes. Also to get in touch with Brittany. So thank you again so much for sharing. So if you want to get in touch with her, you will find the links in the show notes. And also please jump over to my Instagram and leave a comment under the post of this episode. Let me know what is the one insight, the one takeaway from this episode. And as always, share the podcast with as many friends as you can. Help me to make the world a happier and healthier place, spread the inspiration. And I will also announce on Instagram tonight who's the winner for the 500 euro retreat voucher. So thank you very much for everybody who was participating in my survey. And now I'll be ready to even create more incredible retreats for you with all your insights. So thank you so much. And today I would actually like to share Brittany's favorite quote by Giovanni Papini. Breathing is the greatest pleasure in life. And also a note and a reminder from her she has in her emails, and I just reread that, and I think it's beautiful because we talked about breathwork so much. So I would like to invite you to just have a moment, and if you can, close your eyes. If you're driving, you can do it with your eyes open, and just take a deep breath in. Relax your shoulders and let go, maybe with a sigh. And maybe if we do that more often during our day, our life will be a little bit more calm, a little bit more happy, a little bit more relaxed. And for that, I wish you a wonderful, relaxed day full of nice, deep breath. And I hope I see you here again next week.